Hello and welcome to another episode of Inspired Women Gathering. This is a show that talks about all things from life, relationships, spirituality, business, and everything in between. Women are so inspiring, living through their stories, finding resilience, resourcefulness, tenacity, and the powerful movement that we make in the world. I love connecting and having deep conversations, sharing with you the women I'm so blessed to know and who inspire me. My name is Dixie Bennett, and I'm your host, and I'm a soulful women and wealth coach and healer, helping heart-centered entrepreneurial women heal their self-worth, embody their soul purpose, and create sustainable business with heart. And I created this platform to highlight amazing women that I come across and connect with. And I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. And I'm so excited to introduce to you my beautiful guest today, Tammy Plunkett, and our topic is the ultimate transition. Tammy is an author. She describes the written word as her life's blood. Reading is her inhalation and writing is her exhalation, and her survival depends on finding the balance between both. She is currently working on 2 books, her memoir, and a how-to guide for parents for transgender children. She is the proud mom of 4 children, the third of which is transgender. Since walking that journey of raising a trans kid, Tammy became an advocate for the LGBTQ community and volunteers on her local Pride board, where she runs a monthly Parenting with Pride peer group. In her off time from writing and advocating, she helps a select few clients write their own book, or it can be found on a hiking trail in the mountains. Thank you so much for being here, Tammy.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
So where in the world are you coming from today?
I am in Airdrie, Alberta, which is just north of Calgary, Alberta, and just east of the mountains. If I go up a nice mountain road country road every once in a while, I can actually see the mountains. So
Beautiful.
it's not too far away.
Well, we're talking about the topic of transgender, and I know that you have a really quite comprehensive story, so I'd love just to jump in and just tell me a little bit about your journey and how you got to be where you are now.
Well, I have 4 children, and as my intro said, it's my 3rd child who is transgender. I, at the time, thought I had 3 girls and a boy, but my 3rd child, who was assigned female at birth, told us that he was male at 11 years old. He left me a note in a journal that we shared on my bed, and it didn't actually say that he was male. It said that I want to start taking the testosterone that those transgender people take. Like, but it's very typical of Mitchell to just go all in and explain it all right out the gate. So I had I closed the journal and I shoved it under my pillow, and I didn't actually deal with it all right away. It was a shock to me, although I did feel that my 3rd child, I thought, was a lesbian, and at the time she had been very tomboyish since the age of maybe 8 or 9. But the word transgender was the farthest thing from my mind to describe my child. But alas, he is who he is. So it took me a few months to actually come to terms with it and go through my denial and bargaining stages of grief. But then we did take the steps moving forward. He initiated a lot of those steps. He really took ownership of his transition and coming out, which was great. It was hard because I wasn't always as ready as he was to be out in the world, and without that mask of perfection that I had been wearing at the time. So but now compared to then, he's going to be 15 in June, and we're in a much different place. I can't imagine him being anything but a boy. He's always he's just so comfortable with who he is, and has found a place in his in our family. So I now have 2 daughters and 2 sons. So yeah, it's been a transition for the whole family. A transition in terms of how we all look at life and how we measure the worth of a being and how we approach the world.
I love that, how you measure the worth of a being.
Yeah.
That is such a beautiful term. So I'd love for you to go back, even just to go back to where, just the shock of that bomb in the journal.
Yes,
And I know I was just thinking, I'm like, wow, it's been 4 years. That's gone by really fast.
it has.
Um, Because I've really been a part of your whole family's journey since we first met, actually, which has been a true pleasure just to kind of watch from the outside and also to be with you through it. So go back to that time when you found that out, because I know there's some great information in there, and also to share maybe with some parents who are going through the same thing.
Hmm. So at the time, like I sort of hinted at the grieving phases, and this is not something that a whole lot of parents of trans kids actually talk about, is that grieving phase. So I'm just going to be honest because that's all I know how to do. So I did go through the phases of grief myself, and a lot of times when I encounter parents of trans kids in the world, there seems to be these two camps. And there's I am the ultra accepting, I knew all along, or I didn't care if I didn't know, I love my child, and rah rah, we're like the new advocates like 3 seconds after their child comes out. And then there's the parents who I feel are dealing more realistically with things, and it's definitely the camp that I fell into was, oh my God, I didn't know. A, you feel horrible that you don't know your child as well as you think you know your child.
Mhm.
B, you feel horrible that, oh my God, I've been, like the way I've been treating my child has been conducive to them being miserable.
Mm.
Because it is miserable to be living in a body and assuming a role that the world expects of you that doesn't fit who you are.
Mhm.
So, as a parent, you feel horrible. I adamantly believe that every parent loves their child.
Mhm.
Unless there's, psychologically something going on, every parent loves their child. I don't care if you're conservative or liberal, if you go to church, if you don't go to church, every parent loves their child. And our first instinct is, what did I miss? How could I have missed it? Did I cause this?
Mhm.
Uh, what did I say 5 years ago that could have hurt them inadvertently without me even realizing it? These are all the thoughts that go through your mind. And so there's a lot of emotional turmoil inside of a parent. And then you're also dealing with this child who desperately needs you, because the world is a horrible place to a trans child. It definitely 4 years ago, it's just tiny little increments getting better as time goes on. But 4 years ago was the big blow up over, can a trans woman use a woman's bathroom, and what if they're a pedophile, which
Mhm.
we need to worry more about
Right.
how abused a trans woman is. But that's besides the point. Or it's not besides the point, it's another point. The parents go through a lot of inward turmoil in terms of emotions.
Mhm.
And I am here to acknowledge that. That's the hill I'm going to die on. That's the message that I want to put out in the world, is that the parents' feelings matter. They need
Mhm.
to be heard. They need to be acknowledged by the parent, not by the child, however. And this is a very important caveat and asterisk that we have to put on this. Our children are not our therapists. They are not there to make us feel better about how we're feeling when they're going through a transition.
Mhm.
It's not their job to make us feel okay about it. We're there to make them feel okay about it.
Right.
So as parents, if we have to grieve or go through anything, we have to do that with our partners, with our therapists, with our best friends. But I do say we have to do it in our own proverbial closet.
Mhm.
So a lot of times when you hear these moms out there who are like, I'm super supportive of my child, it's okay to be that way in front of your child so that your child knows that they are supported. But it's also okay if behind the scenes you are totally breaking it down and losing it. So I was angry.
Mm-hmm.
I was sad. I was just guilty. I went through all of the feelings, but all behind closed doors, and nobody really knew
Mm-hmm.
what was going on until I started speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a well, it's such a transitional phase for everybody, and it's important for everybody to recognize that everybody's allowed to have their feelings. And I think for children too, it's like, well, this is who I am. Why can't you just, just accept me? Why do you have to have any issues around it? Right?
Yeah.
And but there is also the process of understanding that they just because they've changed doesn't mean that you just kind of pick up and continue on. There has to be that process too. Well, and you and I talked a lot about it, right? So from changing the bedroom to
Yeah.
changing clothes to, all of those things. So do you want to talk a little bit about that process too?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that I'm going to talk about. Two things. Here's something
Mhm.
else that you mentioned is that a lot of times the child and even young adults or youth, when they come forward as transgender, if they're 25 and they come out to their parents, they're like, I'm transgender, accepted, period.
Mhm.
And that's difficult for a parent because the transgender person may have known since they were 5, 6, 7, 8. Um, even if they just realized it when they were 20, 21, no transgender person realizes it and tells everybody the next day. They process it internally. They live with it. They try things on behind closed doors. So it's a lot of times, and I tell this to parents, is you have to help your child understand that while they have known inside for much longer time,
Mhm.
we just found out. So they have to give us a little bit of leeway.
Mhm.
Again, we're the parent and they're the child. We do have to do a little bit more effort in terms of getting the pronouns right and using the name that they've chosen. And if you're lucky, you get to choose with them, which I did. but but they need to understand that we're not going to catch on right away because we haven't been living with this inside all of this time.
Mhm.
But then the transition in terms of what happens after they tell you. So the first thing uh, after they tell us is really changing pronouns. So if my child was assigned female at birth, we used she, her, and when he came out, we started using he, him. It's
Mhm.
hard. It's not, when you spend 11 years referring to somebody in one way, it's not overnight that you refer to them the next way.
Right.
That being said, my youngest son got it right away. Never made a pronoun mistake from
Wow.
the second we told him
Right.
Mitchell's your brother. He's like, I always wanted a brother, never made a mistake after,
Yeah.
which is a testament to how open children are compared to adults.
Right.
So yeah, we changed his name. It's a social transition for children. It's not, there's no 11-year-old who's having surgery, you
Mhm.
know, and that's, I think, what is the misconception out in the world is, oh my God, how could you as a parent allow your child to go and change their bottom parts? It's like, no, that is not happening. There's no 8-year-old out there having a breast implant. It's like these are not things that are happening. It's a social transition, and if you are 8, 5, 10 years old, really you have no secondary sex characteristics. It's just a matter of changing your clothes, changing your hair, um, calling it she or he,
Mhm.
and Bob's your uncle. You just go out in the world and nobody knows any different.
Mhm.
When hormones come to play, then there is a little bit more that needs to be adjusted. Mitchell had actually gone through puberty at that point, so we needed hormone blockers to block the female puberty.
Mhm.
And then he was just a normal kid the same way he would have been when he was 5. There was just no more hormones going through his body.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he's 15, he's on cross hormones. So he's doing testosterone and his voice has dropped. It's pretty remarkable. Everybody's like, oh my God. And his legs are hairy, like every other 15-year-old, you know, is when he goes to school and he sees all of the other kids who are having their voices drop and, you know, hairy legs and peach fuzz on their lip. He needed to fit in with his peers. So those are the things that happen. But again, you know, there's no surgery, not right now. That's just the state. And the other thing that we did is we legally changed his name because it just helped in terms of, although I have to say in Alberta, they've been amazing. As soon as you tell the school this is his preferred name, all his attendance records had that name, his report card had that name. Legally, they had to have his birth name until we had it changed on file, but when people addressed him in the school, they used Mitchell. But we did eventually legally change his name.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want you to talk a little bit about that process of the name change too, because I know there's some changes that happened in that whole process of trying it on, exploring, and then landing on a new name.
Yeah. So his birth name could be spelt differently and sounded masculine. So that's what we did is we kept his birth name and we just spelt it a different way. But and they call it dead naming in the transgender community, is to use someone's birth name. It can be very disrespectful because, and he decided he didn't want to keep that name. And it's because it has a lot of baggage from, you know, from birth until 11, he sort of assumed a different persona to please everybody around him that assumed that he was a girl. So, yeah, we kept that name for a little while, but then he asked to change it, and he came to me with some very strange, you know, ethnic names that were not our ethnicity. And I'm like, can we sit down with, you know, so, you know, little caveat here, our sidebar is that I'm a writer and I started writing fiction, and every writer has a baby name book because you have to name your characters. So I'm like, okay, let's sit down with the baby name book together. And we sat on the stairs and we went through all of them. And I believe in numerology, and I'm like, let's find something with a double letter because it's lucky. And so we actually made sure that we found a name that fit him numerologically as well. But yeah, we had to cut it down to 5, and then we were asking, you know, his dad and everybody, and we settled on Mitchell.
Wow. Well, I love that it was a family affair.
Yeah, and I know that has been hard for a lot of parents of trans kids, especially when they're older, and because naming your child is important. Like, we often find names with meanings or names from our families, and having your child choose their name and just tell you this is what it is and you have no input is very difficult. And I'm so grateful he made us part of the process, because I'd have been devastated if, you know, his name was Jerome or something. Not that there's anything wrong with Jerome, but it just wouldn't have fit him.
So well, I guess going back to some mentors, like who's kind of helped you along the way and who's kind of helped guide you through all of this? And where should people go and look for support, especially around parenting a transgender child?
Well, you can hit me up. But I was looking, the first thing I did was Google, and I think that's the first thing that almost all parents do, which is can be dangerous, because if you just hit on the wrong link and Google is telling you something that is completely out into right field, not left field, and then you think that there's something horribly wrong with your child. So you have to be very careful with your Google searches. But when I searched for Google, and I searched, now I have to say, my first career was, I was a registered nurse for 15 years. And then left nursing actually when Mitchell was born to be a stay-at-home mom.
Mm.
And at the time, so this is going back a million years, but at the time, transgender was actually a mental illness. And so the first thing that popped into my head was, we need a therapist, because what's going on? I knew my child was not mentally ill, but I did know that I knew enough that gender was in the mind,
Right.
and which it is. And that, so that's where I landed, and I found an amazing LGBTQ therapist here in Calgary. Well, in Calgary, so we drove there and had a few appointments with her. I want to say, a lot of times when we go to therapists with our children, it's not the transgender child that needs the therapist, it's the parent. And it's because we need to understand what it means to be transgender. The only thing my husband and I wanted to know was, how do we switch his mind? And is this permanent? And is this just a phase? And can we just, if we were in that bargaining phase, and I hope this isn't permanent, because, and a lot of it was out of fear. My husband's biggest apprehension was that Mitchell was going to get beaten up, because there is more abuse towards transgender individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was his biggest fear. And we were just trying to find a way of, can it be anything but something that will get you beaten or killed, right? So yeah, that was my first mentor. From there, I actually met a transgender woman. Actually, I met a transgender man, and I had coffee with him, and he answered all of my questions. He was an amazing open book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met a transgender woman who happens to be one of my closest friends now. I absolutely adore her. But to have someone who's, 3 years ahead of my son in terms of transition, and going through the mental acceptance of it themselves, and like, I'd call her up and say, I keep making mistakes with his name. I don't know what I'm doing. And, how can I fix it? And she said, tell him to tell you when you make a mistake, or Mitchell. And so that way it's kind of a joke, and he's not, crapping on you or chastising you, and you don't feel guilty about it. Because I felt so guilty when I'd make the mistake. But yeah, having Kirsten's advice was amazing. So she's been a great person to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. This is a question that just came up. Is there, how many children are come out as transgender at younger ages? Is that more of a common thing now, or?
It's much more common now than it used to be. I don't know the percentages. I remember Kirsten has told me there are as many transgender people in the world as there are redheads. So
Really?
whatever that percentage is.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but there are much more children coming out now than there used to be, and that is because the conversation is accepted now, and people are talking about it now.
Yeah.
Kirsten came out as an adult, and when she was growing up in the 80s in rural Saskatchewan, you never heard of the word transgender. And when we were growing up watching television, like, there was Klinger on MASH, who was trying to get out of the military because he was crazy,
Right.
and we would make fun of any man that was feminine at all, and cross-dressing was a fetish.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Kirsten's often told me, it had nothing to do with sex for me.
Mm-hmm.
It had to do with who I was on the inside. So she didn't understand. She's like, I wasn't gay.
Mm-hmm.
A gay man. I was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you don't have words to associate with it, you just don't know what to label it, and you feel horrible about yourself. And Mitchell has not told me in so many words, but he was very depressed and anxious for a few years before coming out. And I think he just didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what was going on inside of his body and his mind until he was able to pinpoint it. And he watched a a YouTube video
Mm-hmm.
that explained what it was to be transgender. And he's like, oh my God, this is what it is. This is what I'm feeling. And I have a feeling that that is part of why children are coming out more now than ever before. It's because families are more accepting. Gender neutral toys are actually accepted. We let boys play with dolls now, which you never would have let in the past, and vice versa. You know, being a tomboy is no big deal with your daughter. And the you know, the internet. Everybody's got access to videos and articles to find out what are these things that nobody would ever talk about in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there like an age? Like, is it younger and younger, or is there kind of like that developmental age where kids are just feeling a little bit more leaning towards one or the other?
Gender is a mental concept. So, and it doesn't develop in a child until they're about 3 to 5 years old, maybe up to 7. But usually by 3 or 5 is when the child realizes, A, they are not their mother, you know, because when you're little, you don't really see a difference between me and mom. You and mom are pretty much really the same person. And then, yeah, around the ages between 3 and 5 is when you realize there's actually a difference between being a boy and being a girl. And that's when the identity of, you know, I am a boy or I am a girl forms in your mind. So that's, I don't know of a whole lot of kids before the age of 5 who are coming out as transgender, but that's when it's formed in our minds.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you decide to become more of an advocate for your child? Because there's lots of different ways that you could have gone with it,
Yeah,
and you've chosen to be the advocate. So tell me a little bit more
yeah.
about that decision and development in your family.
I think I have a big mouth. I think
Very strong opinions. Well, I think
I do have, I'm opinionated.
you have lots of opinions, but
Yeah.
I love I love how you work through things. Like I watch your mind work.
Yeah. And I'm a communicator. Like I'm a writer, and I process my world through writing, and I like to put that writing out in the world. I had a horrible childhood myself, and one of the deciding factors when I survived my childhood was this is not going to be in vain, and it will be in service of others. And everything that I go through is always, if I have to learn a life lesson here, it will be to be of service to others.
Mm-hmm.
And this is no different. And everything that I have learned through this, I am here to serve the person who's 2 steps behind me. And I'll just tell you about the rock in the, and there's a root here, so you have to watch so that you don't trip on the root and the rock that's coming up. And that's how I lead my life. I've decided to become an advocate because of the discrimination my son was facing, and he was bullied in school. And it really was a pivotal moment for me. Before he came out, I truly did care what other people thought of me, and I lived my life with a mask of perfection, and I've got my crap together, and you know, I'm a good mom, and I'm a good this, and I'm a good that, and all I cared about was what other people thought. And I cared about it to the point that I was worried about what the principal at school would think of me instead of worrying about my child. And that was my breaking point. And from that moment on, I became his advocate and an advocate for transgender children throughout the world. I think a big misconception that we have about transgender children is that this has anything to do with sex. And I think that is one of the other hills ditch I'm gonna die in, is that being transgender has absolutely zero to do with sexual orientation. And that is why a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old can tell you I'm transgender, because it has nothing to do with sex. It's all in the mind. Sexual orientation happens generally around or after puberty, and that is different. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. it's just different than being transgender. And I think that bunching them together in the LGBTQ acronym, where you've got lesbian, gay, bisexual, those are all sexual orientations. And then you add transgender on there, and all of a sudden you think that these children are sexually active, or that we're encouraging children to have sex, or that we're talking about sex with kids, and that none of that is true. And so that's why I'm specific about my advocacy for transgender children, because I feel like they need a voice out in the world to not be so much misconception around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel this whole experience has shifted your family? Do you feel like it's been an, I want to say gift, but does it feel like it's something that pulled your family together, or do you think your family would have been on a different track had this not experience not happened?
Hmm. I think that's a very good question. I don't think it's, I think we were good. I think we were close. I don't know that it would have made much of a difference to the family unit. I think it's each impacted us individually so that we're more authentic and deep, and true to ourselves individually. I don't know that the family unit would have changed at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're definitely, we're close as a family, and we always have been. Yeah.
So how would you inspire other families or other parents to maybe be more open-minded or shift the conversation within their own family unit? How could they become a little bit more closer to support their child and to support each other instead of suffering in silence?
Mm. That's a magic wand. I think if I have any advice to give anyone is to be authentic, to truly look at everything that you're doing in your life and measuring to see if it's what you truly want, or if it's what you think the outside world wants and expects of you. And I think that is the gift of every transgender person on this planet, is they are a mirror for us to look in and see if we are being as authentic in our life as they are being in theirs. Because it takes a tremendous amount of bravery to show up in the world and to say, hey, I know that you all assigned me this label when I was born, but this is not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think honestly, within a family unit, as an entrepreneur out in the world, anything that we're doing where we are more authentic and we are truly showing up 100% as who we are, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be beneficial. It'll be closer relationships within the family. It'll be, you'll be attracting the clients that you're meant to attract and servicing the people that you're meant to service.
Mm-hmm. Well put.
I learned from the best.
And what about some of your turning points? Like, how do you think your life prepared you for this?
Oh God, I don't know that my life prepared me for this.
Well,
Although, yeah,
even just some of the
it did.
experiences that, just your own self-discovery that helped
Yeah.
you prepare to be a better mom, to be a better entrepreneur, to be in service to others.
Hmm. I think, well, it has blown open my idea of what it is to be authentic and to truly show up. And, you go around thinking that you don't care what other people think, but we do. And I still do. I'm not beyond reproach now. I care, but, and I still brush my teeth in the morning,
Mhm.
but but it's a reminder. It's a reminder for me to keep looking back, but it's definitely changed who I am. I'm shifting my whole career and ambition, and it's been the ultimate transition for me
Mhm.
to go from, I had been an entrepreneur, and you know I'm gonna make that $100,000, gotta make the $250,000. I gotta, marching towards $1 million, and
Yeah.
just success and push and push and push, and for what? And that's what this blew open for me, is the for what answer and question. And when I look at that and measure it up against the transgender woman who's at the food bank because she can't get a job because she's not far enough along in her transition to look like a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and people are think that she's just weird, and that is, it's a sexual fetish, and
Mm-hmm.
she's having to use the food bank because she can't feed herself, and here I am trying to make $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that truly blew my world open to have me look at, okay, what really matters in my life. And it's not that I feel that I should give all away my money and never make any money,
Right.
it's just, where can I have an impact, and what can I do to help people, to move everyone forward in all of this, and not just one person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, so that, and the other thing that it really brought to, well, I guess it's not only, so it's been a lot of 1 2 3 punches for me lately. So my mom passed away a few months after Mitchell had come out, and then 2 years, my dad passed away this past summer. So it's been, there's been a lot of change. The
Mm-hmm.
universe is definitely making sure that I get my lessons. And so yeah, when my dad passed away this summer, I truly slowed down, and almost had to reintegrate or process everything that had happened up until then, and truly integrate it into my body, and figure out, okay, I've been given these um, detours in my life. What am I doing with them? And really reassessing. And so when he passed away this summer, I thought long and hard about what is my future and what do I want to do. And you know, I this is a big secret I haven't told anyone, but I'm telling you, I felt that the only way I could walk away from a business that was truly not feeding me anymore, in terms of um, fulfillment,
Mm-hmm.
was that I needed to come up with a big excuse and a big reason why. So I said I was going to go back to school to become a lawyer because that was big. And it's, not far from the truth. I do have a huge passion for human rights. And if I were to become a lawyer tomorrow, it would be a human rights lawyer. But the reality is, I just needed to walk away from my business. And I did enroll in school, and I am going to school. I don't know that I have the time in my life left to actually finish law school. And I also have, through the courses that I am doing in university right now, realized that I don't need to become a lawyer to affect the change that I do want to affect.
Right.
So, though I told everybody I'm quitting my business to become a lawyer, I am focusing on studying, and the program I'm doing is called Human Services. It's health and social services, all mixed into one. And I would love to be running a nonprofit that is specifically for parents of transgender kids,
Mm-hmm.
educating them, providing them with all of the resources they need, teaching them what tucking is and what a binder is, and all of these other terminologies, teaching them about the sex education that they need to teach their kids, because we aren't going to necessarily be teaching in public schools the specific sex education that a transgender teen needs.
Yeah.
So all of these resources that I'd love to see available for parents of trans kids,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'd love to do. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely changed me.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and it's not far off from the truth. And I think, as we pivot,
Yeah.
pivot,
Pivot,
detour,
pivot.
transition, right? So as we
Yeah.
move into this new direction, I always think of it, well, I always say life is a constant construction zone. But I
Mm,
find like construction, they move you over into a safer path. Right? So
mm,
you kind of are guided through a little bit of rougher terrain, but there's always the signs of detour. And you
mm,
follow the detour, and then you get to see a different view, a different experience, meet different people, and then you might come back onto the path, or you might deviate for a while and then come back, but you're always gonna learn something new and always have a different view and a different experience that you can bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So so with that, that's powerful. So lots of learning there.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots.
So where do you think, so what's next for you?
So right now I am working on, so I've been writing my memoir for a while. I started as soon, well, probably not as soon, but quite soon after Mitchell came out, I started writing my memoir, again, as a way for me to process. And I'm halfway through it, and it's petered off right now for me. I'm at the hard chapter where I have to talk about my mom passing. So we haven't, it's just sitting there for a while. I do have a literary agent who's supposed to be shopping it around, but she's stranded in Morocco now thanks to the pandemic. So it's just everything's on hold with the memoir. But I did go away to a retreat in January, and the ladies at this retreat were fabulous, and they just kept encouraging me to help parents, and that I should be a coach for parents and to teach them and help them and guide them and mentor them through the difficult times. And one of the participants said to me, Tammy, you need to write a book called What to Do in the First 100 Days After Your Child Comes Out as Transgender. And I thought, that is brilliant, because I needed that book. And so that has sat in the back of my mind since January. I actually wrote it all out, like the outline of it on a sticky paper and put it on my wall, and it looks at me every time I pass by. And so it's been sitting there in my mind. And then a couple of weeks ago, I got an email. So I had written an article, a mainstream article for Today's Parent about my experience of grieving after Mitchell came out. And I am still one of the very, very few people who dare to say that in the public realm. And every once in a while, I get an email or a message from someone saying, oh my God, that's how I feel, and no one else is saying it.
Right.
So I got such an email a couple of weeks ago, just like, Tammy, like, you're the first person to say this, and I'm grieving and I need someone to talk to. So she's from Indiana. And we got on the phone and we had a good conversation. And that sort of was my little nudge from the universe that it's time to get back to writing that book. So that's what I've been working on, is making sure that that book gets written and put out in the world, because people really do need to know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, trailblazer, leader, advocate, teacher, all of
Yeah,
those things. So important. And I couldn't agree more. It's the parents that need the support, because it's the parents that are the voice for the children.
yeah, yeah. And so one of the first things I saw when I Googled, about Mitchell being transgender, was the tremendously high rate of suicide attempts in transgender children, especially female to male, which is what Mitchell is, like something like 67%, 58% in the general. It's like, who wants to take a 1 in 2 chance that their child's going to attempt suicide? So that is why parents need to be supportive. That is why we need to, and that is why I do what I do. I need to help parents help their children, so that no one needs to lose their life to this. So yeah, that's a bit of a, it's a large drive, not a bit of a drive, it's a large drive.
No, I think, and I know that you'll succeed in that. I think that's amazing. So where do you draw on for or where do you go for your inspiration to keep you motivated to keep going?
I wait for the universe to send me emails like that. I walk a lot. And I think that when I'm walking is when I process things. And the other place that I go to for inspiration is the Parenting with Pride group that I run once a month here in Airdrie. We, as part of Airdrie Pride. And it's amazing how every month someone says something that is like, oh my God, I could have told you this. And I hate that people are struggling or going through things that I could have helped them with. If the book was written. So yeah, I get that monthly inspiration, definitely. And my kids, my kids are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All four of my kids identify in one way or another as LGBTQ. My oldest, who allows me to call her my daughter and use she, her pronouns, now came out since Mitchell came out as non-binary, which
Okay.
means that she identifies as female presenting, gender fluid. So she likes to dress up as a boy or be a tomboy, is
Mm-hmm.
what we would call a tomboy a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But at her last job, she used the they, them pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, and all my kids are what we call queer, lovingly call queer.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all an inspiration to me. It's such an inspiration to see them be brave um, and
Well,
to
they're all
learn.
super creative. Like every
Oh
one of them is so creative.
yeah, it's the curse of being my child. I think they're very creative. Um, you know, visual arts, music, everything. They really are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, we're just coming up to the end of our time. So, any
Okay.
other advice or anything else that you can suggest that you'd like to share or leave the
Well, I
viewers?
want to say I know that not a lot of people who are going to listen to this are going to have their children come out as transgender. And if you are a business person, you may be thinking, what do I care? What does this have to do with me in my life? And the advice that I would love for every human being to hear is to dare to take the time to check in and make sure that you are who you really are when
Mm-hmm.
you go outside your door.
Mm-hmm.
And just take off that mask of perfection that we think that we need to be wearing
Mm-hmm.
and show up. Show up in business, show up with your friends and your family, and really your life will be so much better. That's my
Yeah,
best advice.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. This is a beautiful, beautiful ending piece because it is. The more we can take off those masks and be authentically yourself, I think the more energy you have because it takes
Mm,
a lot of energy to um,
yes.
live in fear and to,
To
double
remember
check what
what
you're,
lie you told to whom.
yeah.
Like, who could live that way?
It can be
Yeah.
exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And it's also the facade of the persona that you're putting on, and it takes a lot of work
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to be in your own perceived perfection. And it's not, I think we are moving into more of an authentic world. I know, as a speaker, writer, um, leader, teacher, all those experiences, the more authentic you are, you see the people who are leaning in. When you're
Mm.
not authentic, people are leaning out and they're not commenting, they're not coming inward. So I think it's so, so, so important to be be you in any way that you is.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love
Hmm.
it.
So thank you so much, Tammy. I just adore you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy you have me on.
Yeah, and I love this conversation because I think it's a really important conversation because I know in my circles are growing and I'm seeing parents struggle on every level, whether
Mm.
it's having um, gay children, lesbian children, to even adults. I've been seeing more and more younger well, I guess older teens to young 20s, like the early
Mhm.
20 somethings who've been starting to come out as transgender and they've been kind of doing it in secret and just not really communicating about it. And I think we need to, as you said, you're a key communicator,
Mhm.
especially being a writer. And I know we need more effective communication in the world, regardless of whether it's gender focus, sexual focus. We just need more, better, and stronger communication. We need to be advocates for each other
Yeah.
and to just stand beside and stand by as we're all starting to truly figure out who we are at our core.
True.
Yeah. All right. So, to our viewers, thank you for watching. I hope you found some value today, and would love for you to continue the conversation. Post your comments below. Share out the link. Also, you'll be able to connect with Tammy. I'll post her link in the show notes. And until next time, just keep spreading the love, light, and joy in the world. So abundant love. Bye for now.
Bye.